Hey, what's up, everyone? My name is Evan Freiberger, and today we're going to be talking about the United States, what to expect from the weather down the line, and also touching on that tropical system that is trying to develop in the Caribbean and coming up into the Gulf of Mexico. We'll be talking about the changes in the models there and overall what is happening, across the entire United States as you look all the way from space down into our country. You can see that we still have this broad area of lower pressure, bringing, some cloudier conditions to a lot of folks in the Ohio Valley, going down into the Tennessee Valley. We're going to be watching on the eastern side, might be just enough instability here to cause a little bit of a tornado threat down here. So we're going to be watching for that today and kind of going over what's going to be happening there. We got some temperature changes coming as well. So we're going to be going all over that today in today's forecast. So if you do end up enjoying the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, and let's go ahead and get into it. All right, as you can see, we do have a marginal risk out there, and the main risk with this marginal risk is going to be a small chance for maybe some damaging winds and maybe a tornado. We are going to have just enough moisture as coming into the United States, and as you can see, do have some bubbling already happening there. Little bit of a low pressure system is bringing a little bit of moisture into this region. There's just enough shear to maybe support a tornado threat, a low top supercellular threat, kind of what happened earlier in Virginia, all the way up in this region where we had a couple of tornado warnings. That could also happen today in North Carolina. So make sure you guys are watching out for that over there in Cary, Linden Oaks, Fayetteville, Kinston, Goldsboro, Greenville, Wilson, and Rocky Mount. As far as tomorrow, what it looks like for severe weather, we don't really have anything really to talk about. It's generally over the next week or so. No, I really don't see many severe weather threats down the threat, but tomorrow is definitely another one of those days. As you guys can see, there is no marginal risk. Some thunderstorms could be possible up there in the Ohio Valley, also over here in Virginia, North Carolina, going down into Florida. Also, Arizona and New Mexico could see some thunderstorms there as well. Day 3, it gets even quieter. A little area over here still in Arizona and New Mexico, and then also all the way into Florida as well. Maybe could see some thunderstorm activity, but we're really not talking much of a threat at all for severe weather over the next 3 days. And looking at the upper level winds in the United States, we kind of look at these in order to understand, generally, what the temperatures are going to be like in the United States, and also whether or not any severe weather is coming down the line. And as I push this forward, you can see we do have a little bit of a low pressure system that's going to be bringing in some, upper level winds into the United States, but there's not going to be a whole lot of moisture for that. So we're not really expecting too much of a severe weather threat with that. And been pushing this forward into the second, late at night, you can see that the jet stream here is getting very zonal, is what we call this. See how flat it is? That means, there's not going to be a whole lot of spinning, not a whole lot of mixing happening in the United States. And that's going to lead to warmer temperatures in the western United States, with some cooler temperatures still expected for like the northeast and the eastern portion of the United States. But man, pushing this forward, this zonal pattern goes to the third, continues, maybe get a little bit of a kink there, but still questions on whether or not there's going to be any moisture going into the fourth for this little kink. Maybe we could see some thunderstorms out of that. Maybe some small chances for severe weather in the northeast, but I just don't really see that turning into much, given that at least there's just not a whole lot of moisture right now. Going into the 6th of October, you can see that, still kind of in that zonal flow pattern. Not a whole lot is changing there at all. If we keep on pushing this forward, you can see that doesn't really change. Going into the 7th, still in a zonal pattern flow. Going into the 9th, still in a zonal pattern flow. And then maybe, a low pressure system tries to make its way into the United States at around, the 11th to the 12th, but that's so far out. That signal will most likely change as we get closer. And, we'll have to, wait until we get a little bit closer to get a little bit more accuracy. But overall, just not really seeing too many chances for severe weather. I guess the only thing that we have to really worry about here is that Caribbean system, which we will be talking about in just a second. We're going to do the temperatures real quick first. All right, now we're going to be talking about the temperatures in the United States. And as you can see, it's still pretty mild across a lot of the country. We're talking about 60s and 70s. But once we start to get into the latter portion of the week, we're going to see a little bit of a warm up going into the southern plains up to the northern plains. We got this is going to be around the 30th here, and that's going to continue to push down into the United States with some cooler temperatures behind that coming into the parts of the Ohio Valley and the Great Lakes regions as as well. So that's going to be nice. And that's going to try to work its way down further south, keeping things generally cooler in like Kentucky and Virginia, also going up there into the northeast as well. Look at this, all the way up here in Montana and Idaho, getting down into the 30s, almost below freezing in a lot of those spots, maybe a little bit above below freezing in the higher elevations. Then you can see a little bit of warmth is forecasted to return here on the 4th as we go throughout the day. Another little push there of some colder air in the Ohio Valley. But then look at this, going into the 5th, we could see a pretty big warm up here in the western portion of the United States, 70s, 80s, which is a little bit above normal during this time. I mean, look at that over there in, parts of North and South Dakota, getting up into those 90s. Arizona, California is still boiling over there. And then, as we go into the 6th, cooler than average temperatures continue over there in the Northeast, and those warmer temperatures in the Western United States continues. I mean, look at that, getting back up into the hundreds here in October, potentially around the 6th there in parts of Kansas and Nebraska. All right, now looking at the Caribbean, as you can see, we don't really have too much out there that's really sticking out to me right now. We do have this little tropical wave, though, that's trying to push its way up to the north, and that'll eventually try to form, into a tropical depression or storm. We still have a 40%, but as you can tell, that's a little bit of a downgrade since the last time we talked. We're talking about a 50% chance of development, and now it's down to a 40% chance. So, things are changing with this storm and in the models with this. And so that's what we're going to be going over here in just a minute, is what has changed and what we know now. So let's go ahead and do that. All right. So this is that Caribbean system over here, that little area of, that tropical wave we were just looking at. This is the GFS. First, what we're going to do is go through the deterministic runs, see what they're saying about this system, and then we're going to go look at our averages and our our EPS ensembles and GEFS ensembles, just to kind of see what all the scenarios could be with this storm. But as this thing moves off to the north, as you can see, it doesn't really form too quickly on the GFS here. It maybe gets to a tropical depression there, but it still stays a pretty weak storm. And then by the time it gets into the Gulf of Mexico, the environment is just not as favorable as the models thought it was going to be a couple of days ago. I mean, look at this. We're about 3 or 4 days from now. This is going into Friday here, and this system still hasn't formed. Some general showers out there, but really nothing too impactful to anybody. I mean, this thing doesn't even make landfall anywhere and just kind of stalls, turns into rain, and then maybe another system forms behind that. But the GFS, I mean, we're getting up to 10 days out here. The GFS is really starting to struggle with this storm. So very interesting here that signal has almost completely disappeared. So maybe a little bit of good news, but let's go check the other models. Euro model over here coming in cold with nothing, absolutely nothing. The Euro model doesn't form anything over the next couple of days. So that's kind of where it was at a couple of days ago, and it's still there. So it's still not picking up any storm. This is the Canadian model here, and as you can see, pushing this one forward, it tries to form something like the GFS over there in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. But the interesting thing is the Canadian model is bringing this into parts of Florida there as potentially like maybe a tropical storm, something very weak there. Mainly would be a rainmaker with a little bit of wind, according to the Canadian model, but it's the only model saying that, so we're not going to give it too much credence. But it does kind of show you that there is still a lot of uncertainty on this storm, and also uncertainty on whether or not it will even form in the first place or be able to strengthen into anything more than a tropical storm. Seems like most models are coming in at tropical depression strength or just non-existent, with one model bringing this as a tropical storm. And so now we're going to look at the ensembles to see if we can get an understanding of where the track of this thing will go, and if we can get any more certainty from this point on. Okay, here's the Euro model pushing this forward. You can see that we start to see these colors on the map and these numbers. That's just showing the pressure of the storm, lower pressure, stronger storm there, and then these colors kind of show where the individual member strength are kind of sitting at. And you can see nothing really happens on the EPS until this thing gets into the Gulf of Mexico. Most of these members aren't even a formed storm. Some of them are tropical depressions or storms. So out of 30 runs, most of these runs don't form into anything, and the ones that do are generally weak. So that's kind of where my head is at with this storm now that we have a little bit more certainty, now that we're a little bit closer, is that if it does form at all, it'll most likely be a weaker storm unless something significantly changes. I don't think it's time to completely let our guard down just yet on this thing. We're still about 7 days out. All it takes is one little subtle shift, and we might see some stronger members come back into the model runs. But for now, it's looking like the models are kind of backing off the scenario of this this thing, being a 100% storm that's going to form here. So, definitely some good news there. Let's go over to the GEFS and see what it says. All right, this is the GEFS, and as you can see, it's got a lot of members out there trying to form this thing a little early. Maybe one or two or three saying, tropical depression or storm there. And then as we push this into the future, you can see it tries to thread the needle on the northern side, and if it does, it could potentially form into maybe a tropical storm and maybe even a hurricane. Still not ruling out a hurricane there, but then we had a lot of members going to the Yucatan Peninsula. They just kind of fizzled out. So that seems to be a distinction here, and something that we've got to keep in mind is that if this thing does happen to go up to the north, form into like a tropical depression or storm and thread the needle, it still appears like a tropical storm to maybe a weak hurricane could be possible. But that's only like 3 members out of 30 that are saying that. So it seems like that's a pretty low scenario, but maybe it becomes a little bit of a higher end scenario as we get closer to this thing actually entering the Gulf of Mexico. So that is a thing that a trend we have to watch out for. But most of these models don't have this storm forming into really anything. I mean, we have a couple of members out there as like a tropical storm over there in the Gulf of Mexico. It seems like most of our ensembles favor a little bit more of a westerly trajectory with this storm, predominantly because the steering patterns are kind of pushing it into that direction. But the thing is, it seems like there's still a lot of uncertainty, especially where this thing is tracking. As you can see, we've got a large spread here from Florida all the way over to the Yucatan Peninsula of this maybe being, going into the Gulf of Mexico and maybe impacting land. Some of these have this thing swirling out there and not really doing much at all. So, that's kind of what we're looking out for. Still kind of in the early stages of tracking this thing, but, a little bit of good news, a little bit of downtrend, and hopefully that continues to be the case. But yeah, thank you guys for tuning in to this forecast. And, thankfully for a lot of folks out there, for most of the United States over the next week, we're not talking about really major impacts of anything except for, a decent amount of warmth coming into the Western United States. You guys have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you guys on the next one.